So welcome to the deep dive, and today we're going deep, really deep, on the Minelab Equinox 900 metal detector.
Sounds good.
Now, I'm guessing some of you out there are probably thinking about maybe upgrading your detector, or you're trying to figure out which machine to buy,
Yeah.
or maybe you're just curious about, like, the latest and greatest in metal detecting tech.
Always fun to see what's new.
Absolutely. So to do this deep dive, we've pulled together a ton of info from 7 different sources, talked to some detectorists who are already using the 900,
Nice.
really trying to get a well-rounded picture.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today is to understand, like really understand, what makes this detector tick.
Right. Like, does it actually live up to all the hype? Is it worth the money? That's what people want to know.
Totally. So let's jump right in. And a good place to start is with what everyone seems to agree on. Like, what are the things that, regardless of who you talk to, people are saying, yeah, this is a definite plus.
Yeah, the clear wins.
And that seems to start with the physical design. Like, Minelab really took what Detectorists were saying to heart with this one.
They really did. A lot of the sources we looked at pointed to the improved weight and ergonomics as a major step forward.
It's noticeably lighter than the 800.
Oh, yeah, significantly. It comes in at just 2.8 pounds, which is lighter than the 800, and even the Manticore, which is their top-of-the-line model.
Wow.
You know, if you've ever spent hours swinging a detector, that reduction in weight can make a huge difference in terms of fatigue.
Your arm's probably thanking you at the end of the day.
Exactly. One source even said their back was thanking them too because it takes some of the strain off your whole body.
And it sounds like the handle got a major redesign as well.
It did. This was a consistent point of praise across our sources. One reviewer even said, and I quote, "The handle is so much better. Everything about it just screams quality."
Nice.
And if you've used the 800, you know that thinner handle could get a little uncomfortable, especially if your hands start to sweat.
Oh, yeah. Detector palm sweat, as they call it.
Exactly. And the 900's thicker handle, along with this little ridge they've added, really helps you maintain a solid grip no matter how sweaty your hands get.
It's the little things.
It really is. And for those of us who like to squeeze in a hunt at sunset or even after dark, the screen and button illumination are a big plus.
Yeah, that was something I was curious about. How well does it actually work in low light?
From what we've gathered, it works really well.
Hmm.
The red backlit screen has 3 different brightness levels, and the buttons are illuminated too. So no more fumbling around in the dark trying to see your settings. And the red backlight is a good choice because it helps preserve your night vision.
So you don't completely ruin your eyes if you're walking back to the car in the pitch black.
Exactly. Smart thinking by Minelab.
And when it's time to pack up, it sounds like the new shaft design makes things a lot easier.
It does. The carbon fiber telescoping shaft collapses really easily for transport.
So you could probably just chuck it in the trunk without taking the coil off, right?
Yeah. Most likely, yeah. Which was always a bit of a hassle with some of the older models. And there were some initial concerns about the durability of the camlock livers that hold the shaft together.
Oh, right.
But from what we've heard, they seem to be holding up well. One source even said they accidentally dropped their detector in wet sand and the locks didn't budge.
That's reassuring.
It is. And last but not least, in terms of design improvements, we have to mention the arm cuff.
It seems like a pretty small detail, but maybe not.
It's one of those things that you don't think about until you're out in the field for a few hours.
True.
The quick release button on the arm cuff lets you make adjustments super fast.
So if you're moving to different types of terrain or you want to change your swing style a bit, you can easily adjust the fit without messing around with buckles or straps.
It's all about comfort and convenience, especially on those longer hunts. So yeah, overall, Minelab really nailed the physical design of the 900.
It really sounds like it. But of course, a detector is more than just its looks.
What about the tech inside? What are the major advancements that people are talking about?
Okay, so first, the good news is they kept the multi-frequency technology from the 800.
Which was already considered pretty darn good, right?
Yeah, definitely. For those who aren't familiar with multi-frequency, it essentially means the detector sends out multiple signals at different frequencies all at the same time.
Simultaneously.
Right, and this allows it to see a wider range of targets more effectively and also helps it deal with mineralized ground better.
It's like having multiple eyes looking for treasure, I guess.
That's a good way to put it. But the really exciting news is that they've added a 4 kilohertz single frequency option.
Interesting. And why is that a big deal?
Well, lower frequencies like 4 kilohertz tend to have longer wavelengths.
Okay.
And those longer wavelengths are better at penetrating deeper into the ground.
Oh, I see.
Plus, they're really good at finding silver coins.
So a win-win for silver hunters.
Exactly. This was something a lot of people were hoping for. And the VDI scale has been expanded, which I'm guessing is a good thing?
It's a big deal. They went from a 0 to 40 scale on the 800 to a 918 to 99 scale on the 900.
So a much wider range.
Much wider, yeah. And what that means is you get a lot more detailed information about the target's conductivity. It's like going from a blurry picture to a super sharp one.
You can actually see what you're dealing with.
Right. You're less likely to get those signals where a pull tab and a gold ring show up with the same reading.
Which is super frustrating.
The 900 gives you much better separation between those targets, even if their conductivity is pretty similar.
Can you give me an example, like a real-world scenario, of how this might actually play out in the field?
Sure. So imagine you're hunting in a park and you get a signal that falls within the range where both pull tabs and small jewelry often register.
Okay.
On the 800, you might get a VDI of, say, 16 for both targets, and you wouldn't know which one it was until you dug it up.
Ugh, disappointing.
Right, but with the 900, that pull tab might give you a reading down in the negatives, while the gold ring might register higher up, maybe around 17 or 18.
So you'd have a much better idea of what's down there before you even start digging.
Exactly. Less digging trash, more finding treasure.
Sounds good to me. What about sensitivity in depth? Has the 900 improved in those areas?
It seems to have. The consensus is that the slight bump in sensitivity from 25 on the 800 to 28 on the 900 does translate to noticeable improvements in real-world depth.
It can actually see deeper.
It seems so. There was one user who said they found a seeded dime in a park they'd previously hunted with their 800, and they're convinced the 900 was reaching deeper.
That's pretty compelling.
It is.
And it's still waterproof, which is a must for anyone who hunts near water.
Absolutely. The waterproof rating is the same as the 800. It's fully submersible down to 16 feet.
No worries about getting it wet.
As long as you remember to rinse it thoroughly with fresh water after using it in salt water.
Right, of course. Good point.
Salt water can be corrosive.
And there was one minor drawback that you mentioned earlier regarding the audio, specifically compared to the Manticore.
Yeah, the audio on the 900 is perfectly good. It gives you clear, crisp target signals.
Okay.
But it doesn't have the same advanced audio profile options that you get on the Manticore. One reviewer compared it to the difference between watching standard definition TV versus high definition TV.
Ah, I see.
The Manticore's audio is just more nuanced and detailed. It's like it's giving you more information about the target through the sounds.
It's painting a richer picture, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yep.
Especially the Manticore's rich audio profile. It's supposedly a real game changer for those who are really attuned to the subtle variations in audio signals.
It might be worth the extra money for some people.
It could be, yeah.
So we've talked about the design, the tech, the features. How does all of this translate to actual performance out in the field? What are people finding?
Overall, the feedback has been really positive. Users consistently praise the 900's excellent target lock-on and its super fast response time, meaning you're not wasting time waving the coil around trying to pinpoint the target. You get a solid lock and you know exactly where to dig.
Efficient.
Very efficient. And the depth is impressive.
Okay.
People are finding targets at 9 to 10 inches pretty consistently, and there are even reports of smaller objects being detected at around 12 inches.
Wow.
What's really interesting is that several users have said they're finding new targets in areas they thought they'd already hunted out with their 800s.
So it's like you're seeing the ground with fresh eyes, even in places you've been before.
Exactly. That's a testament to the 900's improved performance.
And how about those trashy areas that we all love so much?
Yes, the bane of every detectorist's existence. But it sounds like the 900 handles trash really well.
Good to hear.
The expanded VDI and the improved signal processing really make a difference. The 900 can pick out good targets even when they're surrounded by junk.
No more digging up a million pull tabs to find one coin.
In theory, yes.
And power lines are always a concern. How does the 900 perform near them?
Pretty well, actually. Most users say they can run the sensitivity up around 22 or 23 near power lines without getting too much interference. The noise cancellation does a good job of filtering out the electrical chatter. Of course, if you're right next to a massive power source like a substation, you might have to turn the sensitivity down a bit.
Makes sense.
But overall, it's a very stable machine.
So it sounds pretty easy to use, even for someone who's new to the Equinox series.
Yeah, the setup process is really straightforward. The basic recommendation is to choose your hunting program, do a quick noise cancel, and set your sensitivity around 22.
And what about ground balancing?
Well, there's actually a bit of a hot take on this. One experienced user said that for most urban hunting, you don't even need to ground balance manually.
Really?
Yeah, they just turn the detector on, do a noise cancel, and start hunting.
Wow.
Apparently, the factory ground balance is good enough for most situations, unless you're dealing with really mineralized soil or you're specifically prospecting for gold. Manual ground balancing might not be necessary.
Interesting. So keep it simple.
Exactly. And the preset hunting programs are pretty self-explanatory.
Right.
You've got Park 1 for general purpose hunting, Beach 1 for dry sand, Beach 2 for wet sand and wading.
Simple enough.
And the recovery speed is the one setting that you might need to play around with a bit, especially when you're first starting out.
Okay, remind me what that is again.
It's basically how fast the detector can hear and reset between targets.
Right, right.
A lower recovery speed gives you a bit more depth, but it might struggle to separate closely spaced targets. A higher recovery speed is better for trashy areas, but you might lose a bit of depth.
So it's a trade-off.
Exactly. Most people recommend starting around 4 for general hunting and then bumping it up to 6 or 7 if you're in a really trashy area.
Makes sense.
So yeah, getting started with the 900 is pretty simple.
All right, so we've got a good overview of what everyone seems to agree on. Now let's dig into some of the more specific details, the things that made each source unique. And I think we have to start with the big question that's probably on a lot of people's minds.
The elephant in the room.
How does the Equinox 900 compare to the Manticore? Like, really compare. Is it worth spending the extra money for the Manticore?
Right, the $500 question, as one source put it.
That's a lot of money.
It is. And the biggest difference, the one that everyone points to, is the Manticore's 2D target trace feature.
Remind me what that is again.
It's that XY plot you see on the screen.
Ah, right.
It basically gives you a visual representation of the target's shape and size, almost like X-ray vision.
Interesting.
It's incredibly helpful for figuring out what's down there before you dig.
So you're not wasting time on trash targets.
Exactly.
Huh.
But is that feature worth an extra $500? It really depends on what you're looking for in a detector and the types of sites you hunt.
And the audio difference is a big factor for some people too, right?
Yeah, one reviewer said they would happily pay the extra $500 just for the Manticore's audio. They said it was that much better. Especially that rich audio profile, it's supposed to be phenomenal.
So for audiophiles, the Manticore is probably the way to go.
If you can swing it, yeah.
And there's something else to consider, right? The Manticore has some new coil options coming out soon.
Yeah, that's something to keep in mind.
They're releasing an 8 by 5.5-inch elliptical coil and a 15 by 12-inch elliptical coil.
So if you're thinking long-term, that added versatility might be a factor in your decision.
And for the beach hunters out there, what's the main difference in performance between the 900 and the Manticore?
Well, according to one direct comparison we found, the Manticore delivers 50% more power to the coil.
Okay.
And that translates to about 1 to 1.5 inches of greater depth on the beach.
Wow, that's significant.
It is, especially if you're hunting for small jewelry and wet sand.
So for dedicated beach hunters, the Manticore might be worth the extra investment.
It's something to think about, for sure.
Moving on to some of the more technical details, there were a couple of points that really jumped out at me from our sources.
Oh yeah, which ones?
Well, first of all, just to be absolutely clear, the Equinox 900 is waterproof.
Completely waterproof.
Fully submersible to 16 feet deep.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
Which is good to know, especially if you're planning to hunt in the water. And the other thing that stood out was the included coils.
Oh yeah, that's a big plus.
The 900 comes with both an 11-inch double D coil and a 6-inch double D coil, right in the box.
That's a $169 value right there.
And that smaller coil is super useful for tight, trashy areas where you need to really pinpoint your targets.
It's a great addition.
And it seems like a lot of people are having success finding new targets in areas they thought were hunted out.
Yeah, that's been a recurring theme. People are finding stuff in places they've hunted before with their 800s.
So the 900 is definitely seeing things that the 800 wasn't.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
And there was a small but nice improvement to the arm cuff that we haven't mentioned yet.
Oh, right, the easy removal system.
It just makes it easier to pack up and transport.
Which is always a plus, especially if you're traveling.
Now, for those of us who like to really tweak our settings and get things just right, it sounds like the 900 has a good amount of customization.
It does. But it's important to understand how the menu system is structured.
Okay, explain it to me.
One source did a really good job of clarifying the difference between global settings and local settings.
Okay.
Global settings are settings that apply to all of your saved user profiles.
Okay.
Local settings are specific to each individual profile.
I see.
So, for example, you might want to set your language globally, but you might want different sensitivity levels for different hunting environments.
That makes sense.
Once you understand that distinction, it's much easier to navigate the menus and customize your settings.
So no more getting lost in a sea of settings.
Hopefully not. And the user profile save feature is a huge time saver. You can create different profiles for different types of hunting, like a coin hunting profile and a beach hunting profile.
So you can just quickly switch between them depending on where you're hunting.
Exactly.
And there's also a pretty advanced tone break configuration, right?
Yeah, that's for the real audio nerds out there.
Explain it to me.
Basically, in the 5-tone mode, you can customize the specific tones that you hear for different VDI ranges.
So you can create your own custom audio landscape, so to speak.
Exactly. You could, for example, set a super high-pitched tone to sound whenever the detector finds a target within the VDI range where silver coins typically register.
That's pretty cool.
It is. But there's one important thing to remember about the iron bias setting.
What's that?
It only works in multi-frequency mode.
Oh, interesting.
If you're using a single frequency, like that new 4 kilohertz mode, the iron bias setting won't even show up in the menu.
Good to know.
One user even said they wasted a bunch of time trying to adjust the iron bias while they were in single frequency mode.
So, word to the wise, pay attention to your mode.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about some of the actual field tests that we found. There were some really interesting finds that give us a good idea of what the 900 can do.
Yeah, I was particularly intrigued by the one at the 1853 school site.
Me too. They found some amazing stuff.
Like what?
Gold coins, an Anzac pin backing, a vintage toy car wind-up key.
Wow.
It just shows you the potential of the 900 for finding cool historical relics.
Absolutely.
And they also mentioned that the startup time is significantly faster than the 800.
Oh, yeah, that was a nice little detail.
It boots up in about a quarter of the time.
Which might not seem like much, but
Yeah.
when you're out in the field and you want to get going, every second counts.
Exactly. And the 900 powers on with a single tap of the button, which is a nice improvement.
User-friendly.
Very.
And that field test really highlighted the benefits of the expanded VDI scale, didn't it?
It did. They gave a great example of how the 800 might lump a pull tab, a 20-cent coin, and a bottle top, all at the same VDI of 16.
Oh, right, because it only has 40 segments.
Exactly. But the 900, with its 99 segments, can differentiate between those targets much more easily.
So you're not digging up trash thinking it's a coin.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
So yeah, the expanded VDI is a definite win.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Now, for our listeners who are newer to metal detecting and maybe considering the 900 as their first machine, what were some of the key tips for beginners that came up in our research?
Okay, so first and foremost, ethical detecting practices were emphasized.
Always important.
Really important. They specifically talked about the proper way to dig a clean, hinged plug when you're recovering a target.
So you're not destroying the site.
Exactly. You want to leave the area in as good a condition as you found it.
And they gave a good tip about the depth gauge, too.
Yeah, they said each arrow on the depth gauge represents about 2 inches,
So it gives you a rough idea of how deep you need to dig.
which is helpful for beginners who are still getting a feel for things.
Definitely. And what about the audio signals?
The best advice for beginners is to focus on the consistency and repeatability of the audio signal rather than getting too hung up on the specific VDI number.
Okay, explain that a little more.
So if you get a strong, clear signal that's repeatable from multiple angles, that's a good indication that you have a solid target.
Right.
But if the signal is weak or inconsistent or it jumps around a lot, it's probably not worth digging.
Even if the VDI number looks good.
Exactly. Learning to trust your ears is a crucial skill for any detectorist, especially when you're starting out.
And we also got a glimpse into one user's personal experience with the 900. And they had some interesting thoughts on market timing.
They did. They basically said if you're thinking about buying a 900 and you have an older Equinox model, like a 600 or an 800, you might want to sell it sooner rather than later.
Why is that?
Their reasoning was that as more 900s hit the market, the price of used 600s and 800s will probably drop.
Oh, because of supply and demand.
Exactly.
So if you're planning to upgrade, it might be better to do it sooner rather than later.
That was their advice. They also shared some specific VDI readings and audio descriptions for some of their finds, which is always helpful for new users.
It gives you a better idea of what to listen for.
Right. Like they said, a cut silver quarter registered as a VDI of 17 or 18 and had a lowish, low-pitched tone.
Interesting.
They also listed some other VDI readings for lead objects, a button, and some deeper targets.
It's like building a database in your head of what different targets sound like.
Exactly. And they had some good things to say about the 900's feel, too. They said you can just swing it forever and a day, which speaks to the comfort and ergonomics.
Nice.
And they said the target lock-on speed was noticeably faster.
So overall, a positive experience.
Very positive.
All right, last but not least, let's talk about beach hunting. There were some interesting insights from our research that are specific to that environment.
Okay, so the first thing to be aware of is that both the 900 and the Manticore can sometimes lose the target signal when the sand is disturbed during digging.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's something to keep in mind. You might have to be a little more careful with your digging technique on the beach.
Makes sense.
And there was a cautionary tale about someone who misidentified a gold ring as iron because the signals were inconsistent.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it happens.
So the lesson there is to always dig those questionable signals, especially in the gold range.
Absolutely. You never know what you might be passing up.
And what about starting settings for beach hunting? Any recommendations?
One user had good success with the Beach 1 program, a recovery speed of 3, and an iron bias setting of 0.
Sounds like a good starting point.
It is.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Based on all of our research, what are the key things that make the Equinox 900 stand out? Like, what makes it special?
I'd say it comes down to a few key things.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, the ergonomics.
The comfort factor.
Exactly. You can hunt for hours without feeling like your arm's going to fall off.
And the expanded VDI scale is a major plus.
It really is. Much better target discrimination, less digging of trash.
And it's still a familiar operating system for existing Equinox users.
Yeah, the learning curve is pretty minimal if you're coming from an 800.
And the lighting is a nice touch.
Especially for those evening hunts.
And it's finding targets that the 800 missed, so the sensitivity is definitely there.
No doubt about it.
So for our listeners who are on the fence trying to decide if it's worth the investment, what's the bottom line?
Well, the 900 is positioned in that middle price range between the 800 and the Manticore.
Right.
If you're trying to decide between the 900 and the Manticore, it really comes down to whether those extra features on the Manticore are worth the extra $500 to you.
The 2D target trace, the enhanced audio, that extra inch of depth on the beach.
Exactly. If those things are important to you, then the Manticore might be the way to go. But if you're looking for a solid all-around performer, that's a significant step up from the 800, the 900 is a great option.
Especially for frequent hunters, beach hunters, anyone who hunts in trashy areas.
Yeah, those are the people who will really benefit from the 900's improvements. And don't forget about the included coils.
It's a big value add.
It is. And it's compatible with all the existing Equinox accessories.
So you're not starting from scratch if you're upgrading.
Right. And it's a great all-around machine for just about any type of detecting.
All right, so let's wrap things up with some specific starting recommendations for different hunting scenarios. What do you suggest?
Okay, so for beach hunting, I'd start with the Beach 1 program. Recovery speed 3, iron bias 0, sensitivity around 22.
Good starting point.
Do a noise cancel when you get to the beach, and if you're in wet sand or wading, switch to Beach 2.
Okay, that makes sense. What about park hunting?
Park 1, recovery speed 4 or 5. Bump it up to 6 or 7 if it's a trashy park, and maybe switch to the 6-inch coil.
Okay, got it. And for relic hunting?
Field 1 or 2, recovery speed 4 or 5.
You
could even try dropping it down to 3 if you're really trying to maximize depth and target separation isn't a big concern.
Makes sense. And what's the most important advice for anyone who's new to the Equinox series?
Start with the factory presets in Park 1. Get comfortable with the basic adjustments like noise cancel and sensitivity, and really focus on developing your ear for the audio signals.
Learn to listen to the detector.
Exactly. Once you've got a good feel for those basics, then you can start experimenting with the more advanced settings.
Sounds like a good plan.
It is.
Now, of course, no detector is perfect. What are some of the limitations of the 900?
Well, it's still a relatively new machine, so we don't have a lot of long-term data on its durability yet.
Right.
We'll have to see how those cam locks hold up over time.
Yeah, time will tell.
And we haven't seen a lot of testing in extremely mineralized soil, so that's something to keep in mind.
Great.
And we don't have much data on how it performs in extreme temperatures, either really hot or really cold.
That's good to know. And what about future areas of exploration?
Well, it would be great to see some more direct comparisons with detectors from other manufacturers, like the XP Deus 2nd or the Garrett Apex.
Right, to see how it stacks up.
Exactly. And I'm always curious to see what Minelab might add in future firmware updates.
Oh yeah, like will they ever bring the Manticore's 2D target trace to the 900.
Who knows, but it would be awesome.
It would be.
Right.
So to sum it all up, what's your overall impression of the Minelab Equinox 900?
I think it's a fantastic detector, a worthy successor to the 800.
A real evolution of the series.
Exactly. It addresses a lot of the things that detectorists were asking for.
And it performs well in a variety of environments.
Yeah, it's a versatile machine.
So for our listeners out there who are trying to decide whether to buy one, what's the final word?
I'd say if you're a beginner, the 900 is a great option, but it might be more than you need. The 600 is a good starting point. For beach hunters, the 900 is a top contender, but the Manticore might be worth considering if you need that extra depth. Relic hunters will appreciate the 900's target separation and comfortable ergonomics, and if you're upgrading from an 800, the 900 is definitely worth a look.
It sounds like a winner.
It is. So as you're planning your next detecting adventure, think about the kind of detecting that you do most often, and let that guide your decision.